Well, good evening, friends. Welcome back to another virtual tour with Pretty Gritty Tours. I'm your guide tonight, Chris, and we are about to embark on some of my favorite haunted stories from the Tacoma area. And there's no shortage to choose from, so I kind of had to narrow it down to a couple that I'm particularly fond of. If you have scary stories from this area that you would like to share, let me know. I am always interested in expanding the collection of weird, unsolved, terrifying stuff that's happened in the area. But it's good to see you guys. I'm glad you're all here. And thank you. We went all out tonight because fall is my absolute favorite season, and I'm here for the haunted experience. You guys ready for some ghost stories? Let's do it. One of the things that I'm most excited about is just sharing things that we've learned about the area. And so for my ghost hunters, my haunted enthusiasts, go to the Tacoma Public Library, and in the Northwest room, they have a manila folder that you can ask for that has clippings, newspaper clippings, or pieces of articles or books where they have kept all of the occult, unexplained, mysterious happenings of Tacoma in this chronological file that they just keep in a drawer in the back of the library. And you too could dive through a lot of the terrifying stuff out here. That's where the majority of my research has come from over the days. But some of the stories in Tacoma that started off as what seemed like just a fun ghost story, I think the more that you pull the thread on them, the stranger and more really unexplained and lingering they become, which is a big part of tonight. One of the most just visually haunting places in Tacoma is this bad boy right here. This is the first Rust Mansion of Tacoma. If you're in the area, you'll know this off of I Street. And this mansion was first built for a man named William Rust, who came to Tacoma in 1889. He became the gentleman who purchased the Asarco smelting plant, one of our biggest polluters in the area, that churned out a tremendous amount of copper and jobs and economic prosperity for Tacoma. And in fact, the town that he built for the workers at the Asarco plant, he called Smelter. And they're like, oh, that is a terrible name. We'll call it Ruston. And so that is how the town of Ruston came about. The mansion, though, has been embroiled in mystery, weirdness, and hauntings pretty much from the beginning. And when it was first built, it was top of the line. It was one of the largest houses in Tacoma, certainly the most impressive, lovingly referred to as Tacoma's White House, and it was 11,000 square feet. I believe that's like when they bought it, it was 200 times the average cost of a home out here. So what looked like it was going to be a dreamscape for William Rust, his wife, and two sons quickly devolves into a nightmare for the family. When William Rust's oldest son dies mysteriously, the Rust family moves hastily out of this mansion into this mansion, just a few blocks away on Yakima Street. And the son that dies is named Howard Rust. He passes in 1911, just a few days shy of his 25th birthday, and it depends what account you read that gives you information one way or the other. But the Tacoma newspaper at the time just runs a very short article about it, how Howard Rust passes right before his 25th birthday of acute heart failure while standing on a front porch in Eastern Washington with some friends. That his bereaved parents were returning home from Europe, grief-stricken at the news. But the mystery starts to unravel pretty quickly from here. By all accounts, there is no real historic reckoning for what happens to Howard. And what we do know definitively is that he disappears after his death. There's no in memoriam, there's no memorial. The Rust family doesn't do anything except abandon their 11,000 square foot home for what I'm going to describe as the far creepier mansion. Then they just move on. They don't talk about him. Nobody puts anything up. Nobody even starts to question what happens to the heir of the largest smelting fortune in Washington state. And it just goes away. Now, there are a lot of rumors that Howard was actually murdered in the Rust Mansion, that he had gone out on some like wanderings through town with a young man, that they had been affectionate with one another out in public, and that when Howard's father finds out about it, he comes back to the mansion and on the front porch of the Rust Mansion shoots his son in the back of the head. William Rust, by all accounts, is a secretive figure across the board, so it's hard to discern where the truth begins and ends. But what we do know for sure is that the tragedy doesn't end just there. After they abandon the Rust Mansion, weird occurrences start happening in it almost right away. And it maintains a reputation for being haunted to this day for other reasons as well. Not only is the death of Howard mysterious, but a few years later, their second son also dies very mysteriously. And the Rust family just goes on with their day, not talking about any of it. For me, the mansion gets even more bizarre, though, with its second occupant. Right after the Rust family moves out, a guy named Orville Billings takes it over. He's a wealthy businessman in the city of Tacoma. He is one of the first automobiles in the city, and someone tries to steal it from him. So he pulls out a revolver, shoots in the air, and they surrender. Or so the story goes. But the fortune of Orville Billings quickly falls apart after he moves into the Rust Mansion because he is accused of raping a 14-year-old deaf girl. And after the accusations for this come out, he's hosting a little get-together in the dining room of his new mansion here. And he's showing off that revolver, talking about how he stopped some guy from trying to steal his car. And as he's showing off the gun, he just starts laughing and twirling it on his finger. And then while one more time laughing, puts it to his head, pulls the trigger, and commits suicide. From then, the fortune of the former Rust Mansion switches again and again to the point where in the 1920s, they actually section it off into apartments. And I think that's where the accounts of it being truly haunted really start showing up in more and more literature. You'll see newspaper clippings about it, personal accounts, certainly a huge collection of the accounts in the oral section of the library. And it's always sort of tracks the same thing, that people will experience an intense coldness in one of the rooms, usually the dining room or the ballroom underground. And when they experience that coldness, then they're suddenly overcome with sadness, and they will hear a gunshot or they'll see a face. And the face will appear to them again and again, but it's not one that they can recognize. It's usually just the outline of a face there. And people that have lived in the apartments there have talked for years now about waking up in the middle of the night and experiencing what looked like someone just standing in the doorway watching them. It's got a long history of suicides and tragedies. Again, in the 1940s, it was a recovery ward for soldiers coming home from World War II. And so just the amount of sadness and death that this house has actually seen over the years is really remarkable. One of the things that gets brought up again and again, though, is in the basement of the building, that there will be the sound of a single violin playing. Various people who have lived there when it was an apartment or who have lived there as a private residence have said that they'll wake up in the middle of the night and there will just be the sound of a single violin playing something mournful. And if they like turn on the lights or they call the police or go down to investigate what's going on in their house, never anything down there. But that parts of the furniture will be moved around down there, or that they'll see chairs rearranged in the basement so that they're just in a small semicircle or facing each other. I wish I could tell you that the mysteries around the Rust Mansion have been cleared up, but unfortunately they have not. If anything, over the years, they've only gotten more mysterious as they've gone on. Today, once again, the house is privately owned. They are a very secretive, understandably, group that lives there, and it's a beautiful home, but very, very creepy. So if you find yourself on I Street, don't be a weirdo. Don't go looking in the windows, but do stop and pause and reflect on the history of this building. Because again, it's remarkable. And for me, having done ghost tours in the area for years now, the more and more that you dig on the Rust family tragedy, the more that it seems connected to everything in a lot of ways. Each of these little, what seems like unrelated ghost stories throughout Tacoma somehow finds its way back to the main story of the Rust family. And it can be little things here and there, but places that they've been end up being haunted. Structures that they're responsible for have the same sort of occurrence of a ghost being described in there as intensely sad or incredibly violent. And the story of this 14-year-old girl who actually gets raped by Orville Billings ends up showing up again and again throughout the history of Tacoma. But I'm going to save this one for a little bit later, because what I really want to talk to you next about is one of the absolute most famous and puzzling ghost stories for the city of Tacoma, the story of the Klutes and Jake Bird. So it was Halloween night in 1947 when this house becomes famous for the city out here. You can still see this house today. It looks nicer now, but it's in the Hilltop district. And 1947 is basically the last time that this home is a happy family home. Everything that I've seen on it, it flips very quickly. And the couple people that I've been able to track down and talk to about it have said that they purchased it and then almost immediately vacated it because they felt that it was haunted. Things that they've talked about are experiencing the sound of someone like gasping for breath, like there's a ragged breathing inside the kitchen, or that they'll just find pools of blood throughout the house without explanation, in particular the kitchen and the bathroom. And the gruesome story that follows the Klute house is one for the ages. So on Halloween night, 1947, two officers were in the neighborhood and heard a commotion. So they come to investigate this home. When they come inside, they find that Bertha Klute, who was a widow, had been massacred, completely torn apart. They find her daughter, Beverly, age 17, also brutally murdered. And the guy that they see trying to flee out the back, they just barely manage to catch. He pulls a knife and manages to stab at least one of them. And it just happens to be because one of the officers was like a prized fighting boxer in the area that they managed to take this guy down. The official police report says that the pattern of his clothing was indistinguishable because it was so covered in blood and gore. When they put this guy on trial, it's discovered that he's Jake Bird. Now, Jake Bird didn't get his start here. He, during the course of his trial, ends up confessing to additional murders in the area, not just the Klutes. And so they stuff him in one of the city jail cells while he's on trial here. At the end of his trial, it takes a jury 35 minutes to find him guilty, and he's sentenced to be executed out of the Walla Walla State Penitentiary. But he talks about a few things in that moment that stick out. The first is that he tries to make a plea bargain later on, saying that he'll confess to additional murders if he can get a more lenient sentence. The other thing is, when he's denied that initially, he says that anyone who has anything to do with his conviction is going to die before him, and he calls it the Jake Bird Hex. They send him out to Walla Walla, and there are just a series of these legal delays that keep postponing his execution. And in that time, the superior judge, Edie Hodge, who conducts Bird's trial, dies unexpectedly. Chief Deputy Clerk Ray Clark dies unexpectedly. Joe Karpak, the Pierce County undersheriff who had obtained more than a dozen confessions about the slayings from Jake Bird, dies unexpectedly. Tacoma Police Lieutenant Sherman Lyons dies unexpectedly. J.W. Seldens, the defense attorney that had been assigned to Jake Bird, also dies. Heart attacks and aneurysms, each of them. Eventually, not long after that final death, Jake Bird is executed by hanging, and after his execution, all of the people who were affiliated with his case, there are no more mysterious deaths. But the lingering spirit of Jake Bird has been seen again and again in the area, and they believe very strongly that this house, the Clute House up in Hilltop there, continues to be haunted by the spirits of the Clute women. And that the area downtown, not coincidentally, the jail cell where he was kept at the basement of Old City Hall for a while there, still maintains a remnant of Jake Bird down there. Now, I forget where it is now. I'm unclear, but they had the murder axe, the actual weapon that Jake Bird used for a majority of these murders in the area, in the city of Tacoma for a long period of time. It eventually goes away. I'm not sure where it is today, but I know that it was in that downtown region for a very long period of time there. And you got to bear in mind, the old City Hall building down there where he was kept for a period of time was also serving as the City Hall and the police station. It was kind of the one-stop shop for law and order down there. So it is that basement area that continues to have the remnant of Jake Bird experiences down there. In particular, security guards that used to work in the old City Hall building near the Jake Bird cell have said that they'll go around just patrolling what is now a completely abandoned, empty building. And then when they go through there, they will just experience something like they can feel being watched, and then the cell door will close. I'll show you the picture again. It is not just abandoned, but creepy. The 16 cells for the city of Tacoma are still underground today. They are completely empty, windowless, and lightless. And so unless you're down there exploring with a lantern or a torch, you're just down there in the dark. We're going to circle back to Old City Hall in a second because it continues a legacy of weirdness, but I want to save some of that for a second. Also, I have to drink bourbon tonight because it's the season. So Tacoma has an incredible history of paranormal activity on like both sides of the spectrum, good and bad. One of our most famous psychics was in the Old Town area, a woman named Rebecca Carr. She was the ex-wife of Old Town Tacoma's founder, Job Carr. And you can go through the documents on her, and it's extraordinary how many times she accurately predicts somebody's future. And she becomes known as one of the most famous women in the area. They call her the Witch of Old Town in a loving and endearing way, because she accurately predicts a lot of good business fortune for a lot of people. But there were some more nefarious elements that were sort of peddling on a different evil clairvoyant circuit that worked more towards what is now Pacific Avenue or Whiskey Row, kind of where McConey's or Odd Otter is in downtown Tacoma. And the stories that you could dig up about psychics, clairvoyance, and black magic in Tacoma is truly endless. But I'm going to share some of my favorites with you right now. The articles that you'll dig up in that Manila folder, if you go and check it out, about the occult in Tacoma are blood chilling. there are a series of almost every 8 to 9 years, like clockwork, another cult shows up in the woods surrounding the Tacoma area or in the Tacoma area itself. And one of the things you got to bear in mind about Tacoma is that we have a series of gulches, right? So these wild, untamed, deep ravines that go from Puget Sound up from the water into the heart of Tacoma and give these long swaths of untamed forest. And a lot of things show up out there. People will find circles, statues, relics, shrines, just things that can be mysterious or misinterpreted all the time, but some of them definitely have a darker element to them. And one of the darkest duos out there, the Long Branch cult. The Long Branch cult from Long Branch, Washington, had, they think, a group that would come from the Long Branch area in Washington and patrol around in the darkness of Tacoma looking for people that they were going to sacrifice as human sacrifices. Now, this cult ends up getting broken up by local law enforcement, and they had a lot of suspicions that they were doing more things than they actually had arrested them and charged them for. And one of the things that they noticed identified them is that they had all made for themselves these gold rings that were skulls. It was like their identifying mark. They noticed that basically after the arrest of the Long Branch cult, that they found more and more of these like painted gold skulls throughout different little parks hidden throughout all of Tacoma, and that they think these were areas where they would go and watch and look for people that they were going to abduct. Again, it's all hearsay. None of this ends up getting proven. And after the ring gets busted and everyone gets arrested, all of this just kind of vanishes. But those areas continue to be almost magnets for just weird activity out there. One of the big ones is actually now completely different, but what is Fireman's Park in Tacoma, not too far from our city hall, used to be a pretty heavily forested park down there. And all the time there's a repeat of this just shadow figure, just a faceless entity that wanders around down there and watches from a distance. Like, people will be coming out of the back of one of the bars on Pac Ave to have a smoke, and there'll just be someone at the end of the alley watching them. That if anyone gets confrontational about it and like goes to talk to them, they'll just walk behind a building, like around the corner. Nobody ever there. No one's ever been caught, but the repeat, almost exact semblance of this person keeps showing up again and again, most specifically down in the alleys of the bars on Pac Ave near Fireman's Park. And it's a big place where they found a lot of that just paraphernalia and weird occult things that they think were tied to the Long Branch cult. But it's by no means the only one. Just up the street from Old City Hall and Fireman's Park is a former parking garage that used to be a warehouse in the 1950s that was the main operation headquarters for a group called Lucifer's Militia. And Lucifer's Militia was on the same page back in the 1950s, where they believed, for some reason, that there was a strong well of power in downtown Tacoma, that if they were to kidnap and sacrifice people in this warehouse right on the corner of essentially 7th and Commerce Street down there, that they would be able to open a gateway to something else. Now, that parking garage down there, which is all sealed up now because it has a whole variety of just weird activity that happens in it by itself, has been one of the most reported locations for just odd stuff happening down there, including a long line of stories of people going in there and hearing chanting. The people would go in, like, to unlock their car, and the lights would be off, and they would just hear like a low chorus of people chanting at the back end of that garage, and never see anybody back there. if they had like a light or something, they'd turn it on, never see anybody. But that a lot of people have told me they would get into the front seat of their car, go to turn it on, and when they would look up in the rearview mirror, it would look like someone was sitting in the back seat behind them. Again, if you're into the paranormal investigation and you want to go investigate a place, the parking garages on like South 7th Street, just around the corner from Old City Hall, definitely have some of the absolute most bizarre stuff going on down there. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about, I think, what is the epicenter of the strange occult activity down there. It is Buckley Gulch. So here's a little map to get you acquainted. This is in the North Tacoma area. If you know where Old Town Tacoma is, sort of at the back of Old Town Park is another almost completely neglected park called Catherine Ersick Park. And if you go to it, it opens up into Buckley Gulch. And you can see the green belt here in the middle. This is a wild, often 200 feet deep, completely unkempt thicket that extends all the way from Old Town, basically up to the campus of University of Puget Sound. And it is terrifying. A lot of families have their homes on the upper edge of this gulch, and like kids will wander around in it during the day, but at night it takes on this completely different energy. And we did a gulch tour on it one time. So we went down and filmed a lot of stuff. And there's almost no evidence that anybody is down there doing anything. There's no homeless camps. There's nothing that's been trampled down to suggest that anybody's down there. But people that live on the edge continuously say that almost every night they'll experience what looks like a bonfire at the bottom, and then just a group standing around it. Sometimes singing, sometimes chanting loudly. I've got some clips of the gulch down there, which I think you'll enjoy. That last clip's important because one of the things that I've encountered the most while trying to research what goes on in the gulch is the same description of a tall figure, like taller than any person could be, ghostly white, that will sometimes walk on two legs or sometimes run on all fours. And that people have said, they swear that they've seen this character down at the bottom of the gulch. And that sometimes they'll be on their back porch looking down into the gulch and they'll just see something that they think is like a tree down there, right around dusk. And then it will move. And they'll talk about it being anywhere from 12 to 18 feet tall with very large eyes and just slender arms and legs, and that it will move faster than they can imagine. And the people that I've talked to about this have said that the first time they saw something like that, they're like, probably just drinking too much. Out partying on the back porch, no big deal, but that they've had other neighbors confirm seeing the exact same thing down there. Dive into the gulch. There are weird things at the bottom. You'll find circles of stones with shrines erected in them that will sometimes just have antlers or skulls or ribbons tied to them. And like rough sketches of a woman, ghostly pale, almost skeletal most times, but just standing in the woods and usually adorned with a crown of antlers. There are some accounts of something wandering around in multiple gulches here in Tacoma, but the stories always sort of follow a similar path, that people have been walking around either on the edge of the gulch in the middle of the night or nearby, or sometimes actually into the gulch, and what they mistake first as a tree will suddenly move either towards them or quickly away. And Catherine Ursick Park down here, I think, is the absolute hotbed for this activity. The people will go down into that park, like to walk their dog or something in the middle of the night, and the dog will just start losing it. Like it sees something out in the woods, and then when people turn to look and see what it is, rapid movement of that tree out there, and that it always is lumbering and moving away. What freaks me out the most about that is that I've been down in that gulch a few times. We actually lead an in-person ghost tour around that area, and sometimes you'll hear what sounds like a low whistle, almost like it's impossible to describe, really, like a steam whistle or something, but with a lower rumble to it, and that it will come from not just one direction, but kind of move through the trees. And I've been down there sometimes where you'll hear it and there will just be the cracking of branches as it gets closer and closer. Now, for my money, I've never actually seen that exact thing down in the bottom of the gulch there, but I have seen on more than one occasion the little shrines that people have built down there for whatever it is that they're talking about. And it often has little pictures of something wearing a antler crown down at the bottom of the gulch. And it's not just Buckley Gulch. A few of the other gulches, and even out to Swan Creek, will sometimes have it, where you'll just be out there and you'll see a circle of stones and then an illustration of a long, slender figure wearing a crown of antlers, and then something, ribbons and candles, for whatever reason, are the two things that I've noticed the most out there. Happy hunting. As far as like ghost stories that have taken place in Tacoma, this is one of the ones that I first encountered that really stuck with me because there were multiple articles about it. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, this house on 8th Street, South 8th Street, had a reoccurring ghost in it that would knock things over, open doors, open windows in the middle of the night, knock things off shelves, but always would reach a point where it would ask for help and then ask people to get out. And that was the thing about the article, is that like they eventually sent legit reporters to come talk to someone about this. Mrs. Pacinda here was the first woman I found to actually go on record. But what she was saying is that she would wake up in the middle of the night and someone was screaming, "Help me, help me, help me." And that she would get out of bed. She would go downstairs thinking that someone was screaming outside. But the more she would go down the stairs and get to the living room, she realized the sound was coming from inside her house. The first time she went down to investigate it, she could hear the screaming, someone just saying, "Help me." And it sounded like it was coming from her living room. And she didn't want to go down the stairs. She was freaked out by it. And 3 different mirrors that she had in her house broke at the same time, almost like there was a shock wave or something. Later, after she had replaced them and tried to like collect herself, it happened about 2 months after that, where there was just a loud knocking coming from different places inside her house. So she got up, she went back downstairs and heard again this shrill screaming for help. And all she could think to do was say, "What can I do? What do you need?" And then she said that it was a whisper that came from right behind her that said, "You can get out." Not surprisingly, she moved out of the house, but it wasn't an isolated incident. Other people have moved into that house on South 8th Street, and there have been more and more documented cases. And nobody knows what happened. There's no record of someone dying in that house. A lot of the places that end up having hauntings out here in the Tacoma area are usually affected by some sort of suicide or murder-suicide. But this house on South 8th has no account of anything happening in it. But there is a spot in the basement of this building, which is not like a normal basement that you go to. There's an unfinished corner to it that they think is probably used as a cellar, or was originally, and just one of those like wooden doors on it, and then the rough stone corner, bare wooden floor. And people that have lived there have continuously talked about, you don't go to the corner room in the basement because it feels like somebody's in there. Different people that have lived in the house have tried to do things like leave a light on or leave something out there, and light always burns out, like doesn't just go out, burns out almost immediately. And anything gets left down there, from an offering, like a shot glass full of something, to something casual like a laundry basket, doesn't just get knocked over, it gets thrown across the room. So whatever happened on South 8th most likely happened in that back corner. And it is a pool of coldness. I think one of the things that stood out to me in the article is when they were talking to Miss Bacinda about what was going on in her house. She said that she first wanted to use that back corner as like a chilling, like essentially a downstairs ice box, because it always had like a light sheen of ice inside of it. No matter how hot it got outside during the summer, there would always be just a deep well of coldness in that back room. But that anything she tried to put back there on those shelves would get knocked over and broken. So she was never able to keep anything in the back corner of her cellar. Oh, I've been by that house. It freaks me out. Yeah, why go in the basement? If you think that your house is haunted, don't. Also, this is a great idea. If anybody is interested in having us lead a like driving caravan of haunting places throughout the South Sound region, let me know, because I'm on board. All right, so let's go on to our next one here, because it actually takes place downtown, and this is something that I personally have encountered. So operating ghost tours in downtown Tacoma, in this back sort of section here, near the McMenamins Elks Temple by Old City Hall, there is just definitely something dark that lingers down there. Old City Hall building, if you've seen any of our virtual stuff before, I got to tour this building. I did a whole thing about it, and it is absolutely terrifying. It stopped being City Hall in 1953. The only time that it had a new sort of injection of life into it was in the late 70s, early 80s, when they turned it into a series of essentially like small business leases, studios, salons, restaurants, retail shopping. And it was never successful enough to take off. Each of those places ends up going under, and once again, the building is abandoned. And when it's abandoned hard. Like inside today, it is completely vacant, and it is in need of some serious tender love and care. One of the things that I thought was really remarkable about that story, though, as it gets abandoned, is that the building manager at the time is there for sort of the conclusion of business at that place. They stay just one more night to kind of say farewell to everything. And the bell tower of Old City Hall rings basically the whole night that they're there. Now, if you've never seen the bell tower of Old City Hall, this is what it looks like. Inside are 4 bells. They were cast by the same company that did the Liberty Bell, and they were contributed to the city of Tacoma as a memorial for Mr. Hugh Wallace's daughter. Hugh Wallace is the American ambassador to France in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And when his daughter mysteriously dies here, and no one ever discloses why this 14-year-old girl suddenly and unexpectedly passes, they build a memorial for her, which is what you would expect. Unlike the jarring silence of the Rust family, the Wallace family really comes through to try and do something to bring a tribute and memory to their daughter, Mildred. And the bell tower is what happens. Now, the bells have not been maintained since the early 1970s, but they will on occasion still ring. And when the manager of this building was there that night, they rang just nonstop. So he goes up into the clock tower to investigate what's going on, to see like who's messing with him. And when he gets up to this portion here where the lower mechanism that controls the clock tower is, he says that he sees a little girl crouched down in the corner with another little girl holding her. He goes, brings his flashlight up to see what's going on back there. And when the beam of light hits the corner, they're all gone. Nobody's there. And then from this staircase right here on the left of the picture, two adult-sized figures that he can only make out as silhouettes crawl quickly on all fours down the stairs towards him, and he runs out of that building. Now, after Old City Hall ends up becoming abandoned, there are multiple occurrences of things moving around in there, motion sensors getting triggered in the middle of the night. And so they hire a security firm to patrol the building just to make sure that no like transients are breaking into the structure at night and like camping in there. And more than one of them had the same story for me when I was doing research on the building, that they'd be patrolling, that they would see someone standing at the far end of the hallway, and they'd call out to them, bring up the beam of their flashlight. And when the flashlight would come up to them, it would be as if they were just made of darkness. Like the light wouldn't bounce off of them and like show a face or anything. Way at the other end of a hallway, it would just be dark. And that they would get down on all fours and crawl to the side. Nobody ever got found after that. Whether it was someone in there that would just disappear somewhere in this massive building, or if there was something else going on, no one ever ends up getting captured or arrested inside there. But I do think it's worth noting that a lot of it takes place near where the Jake Bird cell was. And I actually have a little bit of footage for you guys inside this building. It's also the area just outside City Hall on the street that people have seen this shadow figure again and again, and that he just waits on the corner for you. This is down in the basement of Old City Hall. And right around here in this corner is where I definitely got just the strangest sensation inside the building. As if there was something there that didn't want me there. Oh man, I had to put at least one in. Without a doubt, Old City Hall and that area around there gets my vote for some of the just weirdest activity. And it is the sorry about that. I really oh, hold on a second. Give me just a minute. Our smoke alarm is going off. We made it too spooky in here, and now you get to see that this is an actual live tour. Wow. Serves me right for putting a jump scare in anything anyhow. All right. Back to where we were. Haunted downtown. Without a doubt, the most common occurrence right around Old City Hall is always this hooded guy. And like I said, he shows up in a lot of the ghost stories down there where he will just be on the corner watching. And the same way that people can't get any sort of like feedback from whatever they see inside Old City Hall, same thing with the guy in the corner here. And it's always someone who just goes around the corner. They'll just stay there staring. And if you ever go after them, they just walk away and then disappear. And it's happened to me on multiple tours where I've been downtown Tacoma and there'll just be someone like one block away watching, right? And that's not uncommon for a downtown ghost tour. You try and get some looky-loos or whatever. But like if ever I bring up the flashlight to just be like, hey, what's going on down the corner? Nothing. Just looks like silhouette, and then they go off down around the corner. That city also, someone asked here, what is the light here? This particular photo comes from the Grit City article, the Grit City magazine article about Old City Hall, and they do long exposure photography, which is awesome. But it's the downtown area where not only have I seen this guy down on the corner there, but myself and other people have seen something very similar walking in the underground section here. So throughout several parts of original Tacoma down here, there are tunnels, underground sections, and occasionally you can look down into them. Like pieces of the sidewalk have gone away, or like the little glass skylight tiles that used to provide like rainproof light down there have fallen out or broken, and you can look down into the tunnel section like this. And while you're looking down there, there will just be a fast walking silhouette of a man that blows past as if he's walking down through there. Never acknowledges people that call out to them either. And it's not just here. Underneath the street corner, sort of near the Pantages, is this. This is an old subterranean bathroom, I believe from the 1930s. And it has had a repeat occurrence of not just poor customer service coming in to clean it, but of someone seeing a shape down there. So it's just off of a prop room, and you have to look through a hole in a cinder block wall to see into this lightless bathroom. And every now and then when people are looking in, they'll look back on the corner and it looks like someone just walks past really quickly. The weirdest story that I ever heard about it was someone was telling me they were working in the basement of the Pantages, and they were looking through the hole. They were talking to a friend who was on the other side of the prop room and saying that it was really creepy that the bathroom was there, and that they looked and it looked like there was a silhouette of a person kind of back in the darkness, but they couldn't quite make out what they were looking at. So they had like a little LED light on their keychain. So they bring it up into the hole and they see what looks like the silhouette of a person at the very far end of this hallway. But swear to me that when they brought their light up, it looked like their eyes glowed. The same way that a dog or a cat's would in the darkness when you bring a light up on it. And that whatever it was just stared right back at them, unmoving. And they like flew back. And it wasn't until their friend came over to be like, what did you see? What are you talking about? And had a bigger flashlight and shined it back there. Nothing at the back of the hallway. The downtown area, this is a picture that we got early on down there, and it has a very distinct shape in the picture there. I'm going to blow it up for you here a little bit. But this shape shows up again and again in different photographs throughout the area. People who've been on the ghost tours have taken pictures and gotten sort of the same thing. And that usually it looks like there's just a face inside, like a white piece of gauze or a sheet or something, as if just a face, nothing else, were pressing out through some level of fog out there. Hands down, downtown Tacoma near Old City Hall has the most repeat occurrence of genuinely terrifying and weird stuff down there. And for me, it all comes back to the Jake Bird area, and specifically those jail cells where a lot of the most nefarious people in Tacoma's history were kept for a long period of time in a windowless hole underground. So it's not beyond the realm of imagination to think that something would have stuck down there. Those are my big ones. I'm going to, how do you use that toilet? You don't, is the answer. You go down the block and you use something else, because yuck. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I hope that you enjoyed yourselves. If you have enjoyed yourselves and you want to contribute to the cause, you can always tip your guide using the QR code right here, or you can go to prettygrittytours.com. That's prettygrittytours.com. Right on our homepage there, we have a little area where you can tip your guide if you feel like it. It is my privilege and honor to continue our virtual program. I like being able to bring stories to a wider audience, more than just the people who come out on the walking tours. And I really, at the end of the day, just hope that everybody learns to love the South Sound region a little bit more. So until next time, my friends, stay spooky. I hope you enjoy the Halloween season. Hopefully I see you out on the streets sometime soon. And until then, keep on exploring. Happy Halloween.